It's the draft, fellows, coming at you live. Kyle and Andrew breaking down the drive. Prospects to roster, we got the flow. First round picks to the ones you don't know. Talk about the combine, skills on display. Who's rising up and who's falling away. Roster building like a GM in the zone. Kyle, Fellows, Andrew Mertig, they own the phone.
Hey, welcome back to the Draft Fellows podcast. I'm Andrew Mertig. That is Kyle Fellows, and together we are the Draft Fellows. Make sure you're checking us out on YouTube, or you can find our audio version on your favorite podcasting platform. Kyle, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing fantastic. I'm excited to do this show. It is a Super Bowl weekend, so we're not too far away from that game, even though our team's not in it. And it is a matchup we've had in years past with the Eagles and the Chiefs. But I mean, it's football. It's always fun, and so looking forward to taking in that game on Sunday. How are you?
I think as a NFL fan, there is a little bit of like skepticism about how exciting this matchup is going to be. If you like just truly great football, like I don't know that you could have asked for a better matchup between the AFC and NFC. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I mean, I get it. The storyline is old. So we don't want to see Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid anymore. We don't want to see the Eagles and the Chiefs anymore. But I think when they would blow the whistle to kick things off on Sunday, it's going to be a really exciting matchup, and just hoping for a exhilarating game, and we'll see how that ends up. But we are continuing this week our first dueling mock draft, where we go back and forth for each pick, and today we're going to finish up with picks 24 through 32. We'll go through our reasoning. We're making the picks live, so that's fun too.
Yeah.
But just to get everybody caught up, if you want to go back, I would highly recommend listening to those two, because I think there's some really interesting scenarios that we covered as we went through the draft. So we started things off with the Titans at 1 taking Travis Hunter. The Browns took Abdul Carter. The Giants took the first quarterback with Cam Ward out of Miami. At pick 4, the Patriots take offensive tackle Will Campbell. At 5, Will Johnson, the cornerback, goes to the Jaguars. At pick 6, a little spicy here, safety Malachi Starks from Georgia to the Raiders. The Jets take defensive lineman Mason Graham. The Panthers take wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan. The Saints at pick 9 take offensive tackle Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. And then the Bears, this one's also a little spicy, take running back Ashton Genty, out of Boise State. At pick 11, that's Kenneth Grant, the defensive lineman, to Michigan. And then pick 12, that was last week's episode, kicking things off, quarterback Shedeur Sanders to the Cowboys. Real spicy. And then at pick 13, Jahdae Barron, the defensive back out of Texas. Shamar Stewart goes to the Colts at 14. Michael Williams to the Falcons at 15. The Cardinals take offensive tackle Josh Carnley Jr. The Bengals take wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. The Seahawks offensive lineman Armand Membu. The Buccaneers went with edge James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee at pick 19. The Broncos take tight end Tyler Warren. The Steelers go cornerback Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame. The Chargers take wide receiver Matthew Golden. And the Packers, which was our last pick last week, take edge Mike Green out of Marshall. So that leaves me on the clock with the Minnesota Vikings. And I did not prep for this, Kyle. I forgot it was the first pick. So when we're taking a look at the Vikings, I think you can see reasonable needs at running back, interior offensive line, defensive line, cornerback. I think there's a lot of really interesting things that they could do here. If you're thinking about helping out Brian Flores, I think, you probably want to look at an interior defensive lineman or a corner. Here's one I really like. This is a player maybe I'm not as high on, but I know that the draft community is. And we're going to try to get a different name in here. And so the Minnesota Vikings are going to take cornerback Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. And I think he's somebody that is a late riser, at least as far as we're concerned, that, true late risers are coming after the combine. But I think Amos provides a lot in what Brian Flores is going to like out of a cornerback that's certainly in need, because free agency is going to be tough on them. I know I'm trying to remember. We just talked about the free agent defensive backs from the Vikings, but I think Stephon Gilmore, somebody else. So they are going to be really light if they can't afford to
Yeah.
bring everybody back, or if they choose not to. And I think Amos really does a good job of stepping in there and being a starter from day one for that Brian Flores defense.
Yeah, there's been a lot of chatter about his name around the Senior Bowl and just all of the buzz that comes out of that event and those kinds of things. So I have not gotten into watching him closely. So excited to do that and get to understand what the buzz is about and if he can really go as high as he does here in this mock in the first round. But I'm up here at 25. I've got the Houston Texans on the clock, and I had a couple of names here, and they're both still on the clock, or still on the board rather, for the Texans. And so I've got to make a tough decision, but I'm going to go a little bit different, I think, than maybe a lot of people would. And I'm going to take Colson Loveland, the tight end from Michigan, for the Houston Texans. Let me explain the reason here, because there are a lot of needs that the Texans have, and maybe this isn't the most practical, but Dalton Schultz is a decent NFL tight end, but he kind of lacks the upper dynamic abilities of someone like Loveland. And I just think that adding a player like that would add something different. I am a Michigan fan, and Loveland is a player that I probably am a slightly lower on than consensus, even as a Michigan fan. But there are a lot of things that he brings to an offense that I really think would benefit someone like CJ Stroud. And you're talking about a player in Stroud who did not have the sophomore year that he was probably hoping to have. And then you also have to consider the way that he's going to be without Tank Dell over the middle of the field and in the short and intermediate areas next year with that injury that Dell had, and Stephon Diggs is not getting any younger. And so you can add in a player like Loveland who can work the middle of the field. This is a player who just really does a lot to be that true F tight end who can come in and be impactful in the passing game. This is a player that I thought it was super interesting. He's from rural Idaho, and I had a hard time kind of figuring him out in the interview process. This is a guy who is no stranger to hard work. He'd get up early in the morning, work the farm there in Idaho, go to school, come home, work the farm again, and then go play high school football games on Friday night. So this is a guy who knows how to put in the hard work, and I just think would be a great fit there with the Houston Texans and give Stroud one more option in the passing game.
Yeah, and I, to be honest, I think that is a backstory that the people of Houston would really appreciate. The state of Texas, and I think that is a really interesting pick. I think replacing Dalton Schultz with somebody who has a little bit more juice would be really fun for that young offense. I have a question for you though. So, do you think that the Texans could be in the market for somebody like, let's say, Cooper Kupp this offseason?
That would be certainly interesting. They kind of did something like that, right? Like the Diggs move is a similar move to get like that aging veteran presence in there. So it'd be interesting to see if they would do it. But obviously, Diggs and Kupp can coexist. Like those are two players who could help your offense, simultaneously. So I don't know. That would be fascinating. It will be interesting to see what they are willing to invest, because it felt like they had stocked the cupboards there with all the weapons that would be necessary. But now with Dell on the way, it's unfortunate that he's dealing with that injury. That's really going to throw a wrench in probably the deep cupboard of options that they thought that they were providing to Stroud coming into the season.
Yeah, and I just bring it up. I think that Stephon Diggs may be gone. They reworked his deal so that he is a free agent this year, and so I don't know if he kind of wore out his welcome, or what the situation is there. I do think that with a new offensive coordinator coming in with Rams connections, the Rams saying, "Hey, Cooper Kupp, feel free to explore your own trade opportunities," and the Texans seemingly having the cap room with a big need at wide receiver, if they would be interested in that. But I bring it up because I am on the clock for the Los Angeles Rams at pick 26. And also I had seen that connection this week and thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So for the Rams, I think Colson Loveland probably is a serious consideration. They at least were rumored to be real hot and heavy about Brock Bowers. So Another move tight end to help them out. If they're not going to have Cooper Kupp, I think wide receiver becomes a really interesting need / fit there. I do think that you could take a look at offensive tackle for sure. There's a big need there. I think linebacker, cornerback, all needs. When I'm looking at who is available, I don't love really like the matchups there. The best players available don't seem to fit the Rams perfectly. Like a Luther Burden III, I don't think that's a Rams style of wide receiver. I don't love the tackle value here because it's a lot of tackles who may be better off sliding inside. People like Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas, Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. The pick I'm kind of in love with / terrified of is the Rams taking wide receiver Alec Iomanor out of Stanford. I think he is the perfect Rams wide receiver. So we're going to try something a little different, right? Like
Okay.
the point
All
of this
right.
mock draft is not to go chalk. I think Iomanor and the Rams are probably something that's going to be connected a lot. So I'm going to go a little different. Somebody that's going to stay in LA, and that is linebacker Carson Swessinger out of UCLA.
Oh, wow.
Who is
Okay.
my linebacker one, a really fun player, tons of great movement skills there. He's really athletic. He flows to the ball. He's good in coverage. I think behind that super talented young defensive line, he is going to be a force in the NFC West. So Los Angeles Rams get UCLA linebacker Carson Swessinger.
You had me set up there. I really thought you were going to go with the wide receiver. Like I was biting pretty hard on that, and you switched it up to linebacker. You threw me off a little bit. But I think my players are still here. You didn't take my guy, so that makes me happy. But I'm up at 27 with the Baltimore Ravens. And the Baltimore Ravens, they're just the annoying team in the NFL draft that always seems to have crazy talent fall to them, and it always works, and we let them do it every single year. And so I'm going to take a player here that I am probably not as high on as a lot of people that I really respect in the draft community, and that usually tells me that like there's some players like or some analysts that you see it and you're like, okay, you're not going to change your opinion. You see other people say this player, the NFL loves them. You kind of go back and be like, okay, why? And this is linebacker Javon Walker here, and he's from Georgia, and he's interesting because he's linebacker edge kind of combo player, hybrid, and he's a player like that. I think that if you're talking about specifically the Baltimore Ravens, they're in a spot where Roquan Smith is a stud, but the other guys that they have there on the interior have been relatively disappointing. Malik Harrison and Trenton Simpson have kind of had down years in 2024. Malik Harrison was already on a 1-year deal, so he may not be back. And so they're going to be looking for someone who can play on the interior, but also give them a little bit of juice off the edge as well. And so what a unique situation that if there's a player in the NFL draft that can give you both things, it's probably Jalen Walker from Georgia. And so this is a player who can come in and do those things. He's absolutely going to be a player who is not going to be great as a read and react linebacker. He's going to be good there. He's not going to be great as an edge defender. He's going to be good there. And you're not going to feel super confident with him dropping into coverage. Like he's good there, but not great there. But he is an absolute junkyard dog cleaning up in the run game. It doesn't matter where he's lined up. If it's the edge, if he's off the ball, he's always going to be around the ball making plays. And so I believe that this is a player that is supremely talented and can just be a dynamic chess piece. And it might require kind of a creative, aggressive defensive coordinator kind of put it together, decide what packages he's going to play in and how you're going to deploy him. But this is a player that for me is a little bit of a headache because I don't know exactly where he's going to plug and play on every team. But I think that that is the perfect situation for the Baltimore Ravens to step in and say, hey, we think this is a really good football player. We're going to figure it out later, and he's going to be a part of our dynamic defense. So at 27, the Baltimore Ravens get Jalen Walker, the edge / linebacker from Georgia.
Yeah, and you called him Javon the first time.
I did.
Which is going to be a problem for us as Packers fans.
Yes.
Similar.
Whoops. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, the Ravens have had a lot of success with those tweener kind of hybrid players.
Yeah.
And I think with Walker, you look at him and it's like, well, if you play him as a true linebacker, he's going to be really good moving forward. You love him in the run game. You love him as a blitzer. Maybe not the best pass coverage guy, but you can make up for that by not putting him in those pass coverage situations and letting him rush the passer on second, third, and long. So I think that is a great fit. The Ravens are one of those teams that just figure out how to use players to the best of their ability.
One other note I have to mention on Jalen Walker really quickly. I'm interrupting you. I forgot. We're talking about a player. You're trying to figure out where he fits. He's 21 years old. He turns 21 like a couple weeks before the draft. So this is a player that if you're talking about an ascending player trying to figure out where he fits in your team, like this is a guy who probably has his best football in front of him as well.
Absolutely. And I have the Detroit Lions at pick 28. I have all the NFC North teams tonight.
Nice.
So I think that the Lions could go in a bunch of different directions. I do think wide receiver is a potential need. I know Jameson Williams emerged, but you could really use a third wide receiver. The Lions don't seemingly care about positional value as much, and they just draft the best player available. But they do have some impending needs at interior offensive line, and I think that's somewhere that we could see them go. I think on defense, edge is a huge need. Getting somebody opposite of Aiden Hutchinson is going to be a really big deal for them. And I think off-ball linebacker makes sense as well. So there's a bunch of players that I could see, maybe if they want to go with my worst nightmare, they could take Alec Iomanor, as I mentioned before, the wide receiver from Stanford. I think he would fit in with that Dan Campbell attitude so well. I don't know that wide receiver really is enough of a need to justify a first round pick there. I think there are quite a few players that you could take a look at in terms of edge. I think that list is probably highlighted by Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State, who really does seem like a really great fit for Detroit. But also, if you wanted to go with a little bit of a heavier edge, Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M with a lot of upside there. Donovan Ezeriku out of Boston College. I think he makes sense as well. And then, linebacker, I already took Schlesinger. I don't think there's anybody else that really should touch the first round. Maybe the Lions would consider somebody there. So I'm going to go with interior offensive line. And this is a challenge for me because I think Gray Zabel is the player I like the most here to just plug in that guard and replace Kevin Zeitler. I also would at least have some consideration for Texas's Kelvin Banks Jr., who I think is probably a better guard than tackle.
Okay.
I'm going to go with somebody that I love as a true road grader, a massive human being, somebody I think is really going to make sense for them. And that is guard Tyler Booker out of Alabama.
Yes.
I think for the Lions, like this is a plug and play guard. You want to run the ball, Booker is going to do that for you. In pass pro, he's going to be really hard to get around, and you sandwich him between two really good players on that offensive line, and you're not going to have to worry about the pass pro as much. But in the run game, he's going to get a lot of movement. Going to be really annoying to open up even more holes for David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you got Booker in here because I didn't have intentions of getting to him with my next couple picks, but he's absolutely a player that at this point in the draft probably needs to be coming off the board. Super talented. You said it, road grader. This is a great, just gonna put you on your back, kind of a blocker, and really one of my favorite interviews throughout this process so far. He's an IMG Academy kid. He's just about his business, and he's kind of quiet, but there were some interviews that he did where there was some reporters trying to kind of get him to like maybe say something negative about a coach or about a fellow teammate, and he just so classy sidestepped the whole thing, and you can tell he's just a leader in that offense or in that locker room rather, and a player that I think in his quiet nature makes you just kind of want to run through a wall like next to him, which is awesome because that's exactly what the guys next to him are going to be doing on that offensive line. So I think a really good player, but also a really good dude to bring into your organization as well. So love that as a Packers fan. Don't love it that he's going to the Lions in this mock draft simulation. But I am up next, and I do have the Washington Commanders and I've been talking about your player. I got to find out what I'm going to do here for myself. But the Commanders are kind of an interesting spot. There's a couple different places that I could go, and I thought about going linebacker here. Of course, I took Jalen Walker, not Javon Walker, a couple seconds ago, and so that's off the board. And there's a couple other linebackers that I think are worthy of consideration here, but I'm actually going to go with the cornerback position here. And I know we've had a few guys go off the board, and stacking the cornerback position is very interesting at this juncture because I think we're going to learn a lot in the month ahead of like who's going to actually be these late first rounders and who's going to drift a little bit. But right here, I am actually going to end up going with, he's an injured player, but he's a really good player. And that's Siobhan Revel, the East Carolina cornerback. And so I'm curious if he can still go in the first round. He's dealing with an ACL injury, but he's 6'3", 193 pounds. And this is a team that has a player in Mike Samerstill who was great for them this year, but Samerstill is a smaller player. Samerstill played most of his snaps at outside corner, which is a little bit surprising given his stature, but they need someone opposite that. And so I think that they get bring in someone like Siobhan Revel to be that other guy on the other side. I think it could do a lot for this defense as a whole going forward. So at 29, I'm going to go Siobhan Revel or Shavon, depending on how you say it, to the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, I really, really like Revel a lot. It'll be interesting to see how NFL teams view that injury because obviously he's not going to get to test. I would imagine he would have been a great tester at the combine. I think his RAS score would have been through the roof and probably would have vaulted him up the list. I think, when you take a look at, the Commanders defense, you want ball hawks, and I think Revel can be that for them.
Mm-hmm.
I think, they certainly have a lot of needs in that secondary and on the defense in general. And I think if he hits, you've got a really special player, a top 10 talent that you're getting late in the first round. And so I really like that pick. I'm up at pick 30 with the Buffalo Bills, and, it's just who can get them over the hump. Got to be so frustrating to be a Bills fan at this point, and they have all of the talent to do it. This was supposed to be a reset year, and Josh Allen just came out, set the world on fire, and said, I don't need a number one wide receiver to be this good. So the Bills, when I take a look at their needs, I think wide receiver does stick out. The Amari Cooper experience didn't really work the way that they wanted it to, and that's fine. No harm, no foul. I think Keon Coleman is somebody that they'll look to continue to develop. But, you see players like Mac Hollins stepping up and playing gigantic roles in this team. And you have to wonder, what if they had somebody with a little bit more talent, but also the upside? This is every single pick tonight. I'm going to mention Alec Iomanor. I think he is like a prototype for them. The problem is I don't know if there's enough diversity between him and Keon Coleman. Maybe they don't care about that, but I love the effort he brings in the blocking game. I just don't think the Bills are going to go with a wide receiver here. I think you could see needs at defense lineman, linebacker, corner. You probably took the corner that I would have gone with had he been here. Darian Porter out of Iowa State is super interesting. He's like 6'4". He's huge. He has a little bit of trouble in the transitioning. I don't think he's an ideal Bills corner. I think they would probably prefer somebody with a little bit more movement skills after the Kyer Elam experience. I think that linebacker probably is a little too early with Schlesinger off the board. So I'm going to go defensive lineman. But I'm going to pick somebody, and I don't know if you have watched this player yet, Kyle, but I'm going to go with Toledo's Darius Alexander, the interior defensive lineman. And this is the guy who is a freak show athlete, super strong.
Okay.
I think he plays with a surprising amount of bend for a guy his size. He's got really nice movement skills, and this dude just plays hard. And I think a coach like Sean McDermott is going to fall in love with somebody like this. So I think this is a great addition alongside of Ed Oliver. Get that interior pass rush geared up, put some pressure in Patrick Mahomes' face, and let those edge players collapse the pocket from the outside as you're collapsing from the inside and really, continue to change the dynamics of this defense. So Darius Alexander, defense lineman out of Toledo, to the Bills.
Yeah, I like that a lot for the fit there. And I haven't watched Alexander yet. He's one of those players that's gotten a little bit of buzz the last few weeks. And it's interesting, like coming into this draft class, I think a lot of people were a little bit down on the talent in this group. But and cornerback is one of those positions where it keeps feeling like we're just continuing to find more and more talent at that position. And so I think it just speaks to like this happens every year where we're like, the class is okay. And then we get into it and we're like, man, there's more guys here than we thought. And so I think especially this late first round range is going to be really, really, I think there's going to be a lot of guys to be had at the end of the first, early second. And I think that cornerback position is going to be one to watch for sure. So excited to get into Alexander a little bit more and get to know his tape soon. But I've got the Eagles up here at 31. And we kind of teased this at the beginning of the show, talking about the Super Bowl, that maybe you're not super excited about the matchup that you get to watch in the Super Bowl this year. But the reason that these teams are here is because they're super good and it makes for good football. But it also is, as I look through the roster for the Philadelphia Eagles, it's very apparent that they have built a very talented team, but also a relatively deep football team as well. And so when you even go to address their needs for the future, you have a lot of options because you don't have to fill anything in particular, which is exactly where you want to be as an organization. So with all those options, there is one spot here where I feel like it makes sense for them to address. And Brandon Graham has an expiring contract, and he is going to be 37 in just a few months. So, I mean, what a guy. Like, to play at the way that he's played through age 37 is phenomenal. What a career. But I mean, maybe he doesn't retire. I don't know. I haven't heard for sure if that's the plan, but 37 years old, that's a long career. And then Josh Sweat is also hitting free agency there. So what is a very, very full roster. This is an apparent need on the edge there for the Eagles. So I'm going to go with Donovan Izaraku, the pass rusher. And I am blanking on the school. Andrew, do you remember?
Boston College.
Thank you. My gosh, there we go. My notes here, just I didn't put it in there, and I had a brain fart there for a second. Of course, Boston College. Love the interview for Izaraku. He definitely plays with a chip on his shoulder, being 6'2" and 248 pounds. You kind of like the Brandon Graham replacement plan there as someone who is a little bit more stout. You kind of feel like the Eagles would know what to do with someone who has a little bit of a more stout build there. He's not super long, but he does have the really long arms. His arms are 34.5 inches long. So I like the idea of them getting someone that has a little bit of juice and speed off the edge, who can come in and maybe replace a little bit of what's probably walking out the door there this offseason from their pass rush.
And then I have the Kansas City Chiefs at 32. We're going off of Pro Football Focus's mock draft, so don't blame us. We're not projecting the Chiefs beat Philly. Is this the draft order we were given? Don't be mad at us. And the Chiefs, I think, can go in a ton of different directions. I think offensive tackle is probably their biggest need. But also, taking a look at defensive line and linebacker. I've mentioned linebacker. I don't love the value here. I think running back is a sneaky need there, getting somebody to relieve Isaiah Pacheco. Even if Kareem Hunt is going to be more of a short-term answer for next year. I think wide receiver could be a need, but maybe we see a reunion with Tyreek Hill. I hope not, maybe. But we'll see what happens. I really do think that there are a bunch of tackles here that they could go with. Kelvin Banks, I mentioned before. Gray Zabel, probably more of a guard. But you could take a look at the kind of that next tier of tackle, Arante Ursary from Minnesota. You could take a look at Cameron Williams from Texas, Wyatt Millam from West Virginia, which was going to be my pick until a moment ago. But I'm going to go with an edge. And I know that's not a perceived need, but I think the value here is just too darn good. I like Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. I think you throw him in there with another former Big Ten edge rusher and George Karlaftis. And those two guys are going to be able to thrive on the edge, living off of all the attention that Chris Jones generates towards himself. I think, you can never have too many edge rushers, and the Chiefs definitely believe that. So The last pick of the first round is going to be Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. And that is going to wrap up our dueling mock draft.
Our first dueling mock draft of 2025. It's been fun to go through the process, and I think we had some interesting results mixed in here. We tried not to stay chalk, as Andrew said, do some things a little bit differently. Next week, we're going to go a little bit deeper. Andrew's going to look at a 2-round mock draft, at least in the next couple weeks here. Yeah, 2 rounds. We're going to have some fun with that. So stick with us. If you missed the first couple of shows leading into the end of this first round mock, go back and catch up so you can see what we did throughout the beginning of round 1. But stick with us. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Draft Fellows, and we're going to stick with you throughout the process as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft. But from the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.
Kyle got the insight, Andrew brings the heat. Breaking down the roster every single week. Catch us on the podcast, we coming through your speakers. Top picks for practice squad, we got the seekers. Team dynamics, contracts, and the trades. From the draft day excitement to the accolades. Draft Fellows on the track, we gone strong. Analyze the plays, we can't be wrong. From the 40-yard dash to the longest throw. We talking pro ball, yeah, you know.